Well, good day, folks, and welcome to another edition of Lumberjack Logic. I'm your host, Neil Johnson. Excited to be with you and bring you this great interview. I actually watched a documentary in the past year, and I saw this sheriff on the documentary, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then I talked to him on the phone, and I thought, I have got to get this guy on the show because I think there are just important issues to discuss here, not only in terms of law enforcement and policing, but also there's something going on up in the northwest part of the United States called the Redoubt. And we're going to get into that, and I'm excited to do that. Before I get going, really quickly, do want to thank my sponsor, Revere Coffee Company. So that's reverecoffeecompany.com. Use promo code Lumberjack. You'll save 10%, and it supports the show. Thank you so much. And thanks to the sponsor. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in the Spokane County Sheriff, Ozzie Knezovich. Sheriff Knezovich.
How are you doing?
I am doing all right. It's good to have you on. I've got a lot of family in law enforcement over the years. And actually, one of my best friends who I'm going elk hunting with this fall was Peace Officer of the Year on the Minneapolis Police Department. It's a noble profession and a necessary profession. And I think the sheriff is, well, quite frankly, in the most unique position as a law enforcement officer, because not only are you law enforcement, but you're also a politician. It's a political office as well as a law enforcement office. And it seems there were a lot of safeguards within the Constitution that gave a lot of authorities to sheriffs. And I want to talk to you briefly about that, but I also really want to talk to you about the Redoubt, because you're dealing with that up there. And I watched, just so you people know, I'm like a freedom-loving, God-fearing patriot, God bless America the whole way kind of guy. But I watched this, and it was actually done by a British journalist. And I found that the concerns that were raised in the course of this documentary to be valid, and because I don't want to see people trade one form of tyranny for another. And so that's why I wanted to have Sheriff Knezovich on. So I'm really excited about this. If you could do me a favor too, folks, just smash that like as you come into the show and chat it up with where you're from. I see Barbara is on from Spokane. So anyhow, Sheriff Knezovich, do you want to just kind of start and maybe explain, well, first off, how long have you been sheriff up there in Spokane County?
16 years.
16 years. And before that, were you a deputy on the same department?
I was. I actually started my law enforcement career in 1990, and I've been in law enforcement for approximately the last 32 years. And I came to the Spokane County Sheriff's Office in 1996, and I worked my way up through the ranks and was appointed sheriff in April of 2006, and I was elected sheriff in November of that year.
Okay, got it. Yeah, actually my wife's uncle was the sheriff of Blue Earth County, Minnesota, and then her dad was captain on the sheriff's squad, and they actually were in. I saw this magazine article. They solved one of the crimes of the century. It was kind of one of these big stories. It was written up in all these magazines. It's kind of an interesting story, but. Let me ask you this question. Just, I know that when you take on an office like this, it's public service, okay? And I'm from I guess what I want to say, the mold where I think public service could be a noble career. A lot of politicians I don't think are all that noble right now. So, and a lot of my audience knows that. But, I think there's also a kind of a disconnect between constituents and officials, where it's like, and I've seen this, and I want to bring this up because I think you need to find a way to work with your elected officials, whether that's your sheriff, whether that's an elected representative, and learn how to have proper dialogue, because I've seen it be completely improper. And they're saying, well, we're their boss. Well, do you like working for a jerk of a boss? What's the climate like up there? What do you deal with on a day in, day out basis as a sheriff in terms of the public and, do you find it to mainly be hospitable? You're in an area that maybe is a little more hospitable to law enforcement than my friend in Minneapolis.
You know, you bring up a really interesting point about that dialogue and that partnership between the community and electeds. That goes two ways. I've seen community members that, should really take a page out of what you just said as far as how they talk to elected officials. Because when you're yelling and screaming at people, that will shut them down really quick. But at the same time, right now, I have a different dynamic going on in the city of Spokane, in that the elected council of the city of Spokane refuses to really meet and work with members of the community over the fact that we've had multiple drive-by shootings in our area, multiple kids dying because of it, and you can't get them to really engage. So I have a meeting this morning that came out of a podcast that I did, a YouTube video I did, calling these people out. And I'm like, how can you call yourself an elected official if you're not willing to step up and deal with the fact that we have kids dying in the streets of Spokane, and you're not even raising an alarm about that? And I find it very disconcerting when elected officials care more about their agendas, their dogma, their ideology, than they do the people that actually elected them. And there's a true disconnect that I see even at the national level. People that at the national level have seemed to have forgotten that we did elect them, and we did elect them to represent us. Now, are we always going to agree? Well, no, we're not. But they should at least be weighing what we say before they make their decisions. And anymore, they really don't care about what you have to say. It's about the dogma of their party. Left, right, it doesn't matter. They're all guilty. And they seem to have forgotten that they're Americans before they are anything else. They're Americans before they're a Democrat. They're Americans before they're Republicans. They need to get back to the idea that we did send them to Washington to do a job. And the part of that job was to represent truly what we, the people, have to say about these issues. And right now, you can't get anything done in Washington, D.C., because it's all about their own power and their own dogma. And that needs to end. But it doesn't help, though, when you have people screaming at school board members about issues, and the school board members are going, well, wait, time out. We didn't see this happening. But at the same time, they didn't help themselves when they started kicking people out of meetings.
No, not at all. And at the schools and the school board meetings, I think that's really, and I've covered this ad nauseum, because I think that's where, so being a conservative as I am, the schools basically became liberal indoctrination camps. And so I don't think that a lot of parents are involved enough in their kids' lives to actually understand what's going on in the schools. They're wanting the schools to raise their kids, and they're just not that involved. Well, then all of a sudden it got so bad that people became concerned and involved. I've seen school board meetings where it is obvious that the school board doesn't care what the parents are saying at all, even when it's, respectful. So I can understand the parents' frustration, like particularly out in Virginia, where the guy had his daughter sexually abused, okay, and then they're trying to cover it up. And then they're hauling him out of there. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? This guy, if you had said that about my daughter, I would have been having a freak fest. Okay. I don't think I could have been really contained at that point. I mean, when she's been actually sodomized, I mean, it was unbelievable what happened to her. And then they tried to sweep that under the rug.
And the school board issue that you talk about, if you want to talk to me, really pretty easy to do, as you found out.
Yeah.
I meet with citizens from around the county all the time, and I met with a group of concerned parents about issues going on in school, COVID, critical race theory, you name it. I've talked to people about those issues, and one of the most amazing discussions I had, and one of the more meaningful ones, and I use this wherever I go speaking now, trying to get our electeds to realize your job is to actually talk to people. Your job is actually to listen, and even if they're a little angry, you can still sit and listen. You can agree to disagree at the end, but you should listen. I had this father say, Sheriff, I trusted my school board to do the right thing. I trusted my superintendent to do the right thing. I trusted my teachers to do the right thing and teach my kids the right way. And then I woke up and found the next thing I see is, a lot of angst over the COVID issue, a lot of angst over the critical race issues. And he said, I fell asleep. Well, I'm seeing a lot of people starting to wake up, which I'm really glad. It's about time you're waking up. And I think it's time that they need to become more part of their kids' lives and not trust all these other people that you've been trusting to do the right thing. Because right now, I'm not seeing that happen a lot. You do have great school board members. You have great people doing a lot of good work. But there is an agenda being driven here. And parents need to wake up to what that agenda is.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, because I want to talk about the Redoubt, but how would you describe yourself? Would you be leaning more towards the conservative side or towards the liberal side, centrist? How would you describe kind of your outlook on life?
I'm more conservative than anything else. Really, I'm kind of in that more kind of center to conservative. But more importantly, I really have just gotten tired of the labels.
Yeah.
I'm tired of the labels of left, right. I mean, depending on who you talk to, if you're talking to, let's say, the extreme right, well, some people on the extreme right call me a Marxist. And if you're talking to the extreme left, they call me a right-wing extremist. Which neither one of them, the extreme right or extreme left, like
Well, can't be true.
And then neither side like me, and I'm okay with that because I really don't like them either. I don't like the extremes. I right there with the 80% of this nation, and the 80% of this nation is looking at these extremes, going, "How do we get here? How did you get elected? And my God, we have to fix this problem." And I'm watching more and more people wake up to the fact that, the extremes on both sides are causing us nothing but hate and discontent. And I'll tell you, the easiest way to fix this, folks, it's this. Here it is. You want your country back? Here's how you get your country back. You vote. And you vote specifically in the primaries, because these extremes vote in the primaries and they get these extreme candidates through while you're sleeping. Run people, and the people you want to run, number one qualification has to be integrity. I don't know how many times I've heard people talk about extreme politicians of, I don't care about their integrity, Sheriff. I just care about how they vote. Well, guess what, folks? That's why your nation's in such a crisis. You stopped electing people with integrity. You elected ideologues. You elected demagogues. It's time to start electing Americans again, so we take care of the American people. Vote in the primary. You want your country back? Vote specifically in the primary.
I've been on this message. Get to your caucus, get to your primary, vet the candidates. One of my audience's greatest concern is what they call rhinos, Republicans in name only, because it is kind of a uniparty situation. But I think people consider me extreme right, but really my only guidance, and I guess what I want to see is I just want the government out of my life. I just want to be able to live my life. I like the Constitution. I had a guest on the other day who wrote this book, Christianity and Government, and the whole point of it was that government's only job is to basically protect and serve, right? So it's police, fire, roads, these types of things, and they're trying to turn the dials, turn the levers on everything of who can say what and who can't say what. But speaking now, I want to go over to the issue of the Redoubt, because you always hear like there's this Northern Idaho contingent of Nazi sympathizers, okay, and then you hear that there's this group and that group and whatever. And I'll be honest, I never, it's funny over the course. I was in the 90s and the 2000s. I didn't see a lot of this racism and all this. I didn't. I mean, I did not, and I lived in the Kraken inner city during the 90s. I actually lived right in the midway of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and my neighbors were black and some were white, and we got along fine. We talked to each other, everything was fine. I mean, it was like a neighborhood, and I'm telling you, I think it's gotten like 10 times worse I think since identity politics in Obama's tenure were so bad that it amped up this whole race garbage. I don't even recognize it right now. And, going back to the inner city isn't like the inner city I used to go live in. It's nuts. I mean, what have you seen? I mean, what's up with this contingent in Northern Idaho and the Redoubt? And are we trading? Are they just kind of trading one form of tyranny for another? Because that's kind of what you were. If it's about control, that's what we don't want them to have is control, because the whole idea behind a representative government is that they don't have control.
You're absolutely right about what the Redoubt is about. It's just another form of tyranny that you're trading for, a government-led, if you will. The Redoubt is an old concept, and the area I live in, we have a lot of influence from the Christian identity movement. The Christian identity movement is very anti-Semitic, is white supremacist. There's no if and buts wars about it. There's been plenty of documents written about it. There's been plenty of research that's been done into it, and the Aryan nations who have a compound just about 20 miles, to the east of Spokane, was very much immersed in the Christian identity movement. All that has kind of spread through, and it kind of wanes and comes back together and wanes and goes down. But the Redoubt, back in the Christian identity days, there was they wanted a
Christian identity movement, because I identify as a Christian. So I mean, it seems like at first you're thinking this sounds like me.
Sounds great, right? However, that's one of those vortexes that they suck good people down. How can you be against, Sheriff, something that says Christian? Well, when you're using Christ to pull the wool over other people's eyes, and you're using Christ as a tool to promote your own hate, and we've seen religion used to promote hate for centuries. It just isn't anything new. But the Christian identity movement is white supremacist. They are anti-Semitic. Jews are what they call the spawn of Satan. I mean, it's that vulgar. So when you start talking about that type of movement, and they wanted a homeland. That homeland consists of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and then they added Alaska a couple of decades ago. So that was supposedly going to be the Christian identity. It was going to be a theocracy based, and that was the end goal. You know, they're waiting for a tripwire for the United States to break itself apart. That's been the mantra for a long time.
Well, they almost got it. I mean, with what's going on right now,
we're close. Where does the Redoubt come in? Same states are involved in this Redoubt movement, and the Redoubt. The thing that really irritates me is some of these groups have co-opted some of the symbols that are most dear to every American.
Yeah.
You know, the patriot, the term patriot, that is very dear to Americans and American society.
I'm a patriot.
You know, exactly. We all consider ourselves patriots, but some of these patriots, some of these so-called patriots, they're using that patriot movement as basically a false flag, and their goal is to not support and defend the Constitution. It is to take this country down and break it apart and have their own homelands. And you know, it's a bad mix. And the Redoubt is sucking a lot of people into that mindset, and it's really sad to watch.
How big is it? I mean, I mean, I had heard of it before. I mean, when I watched the piece on it, it was it looked like maybe it was a little bigger than I had known it to be.
It is. It's a movement that is substantial enough that they do have a following, and that following is anywhere from 25,000 to 100,000 people. That's fairly significant.
Yeah.
When you start talking that many people, and the whole idea is to come together in an area that you control. Basically, you move into the area, you start taking over the local politics, start taking control of some of the state politics positions, and it is that type of erosion. But I've had to deal with some of these characters, that consider themselves patriots and everything else. And we have a movement, or had a movement, it's pretty much died now, for 51st state, the state of liberty. It was going to be the eastern side of the state of Washington,
Yep.
over to Idaho. And the people behind that were truly trying to create a theocracy. I literally have the oath that you would swear to this new state. It has nothing to do with the Constitution of the United States. You're not swearing an oath like I took. I don't know if you're military, prior military.
I'm not.
But
I had braces on my teeth. They wouldn't let me in. It was funny.
I'm military, and I've served this country for 37 years in uniform, in one form or another. And my oath was to the Constitution and to the people of this country. Their oath was solely to Jesus Christ, and it didn't mention anything about the United States. That is a theocracy. That's going totally against what our founding fathers put in play. Now, a lot of people will argue and say that the United States isn't a Christian nation, and I go, are you out of your mind? The United States is a Christian nation. It was founded based on those principles. If you don't believe me, go back east and look at all the monuments. Whose name will you find on them? God's. And there's no doubt about that. But they also wanted to make sure that people had the freedom to believe how they wished to believe.
Because that's what they had escaped was this religious persecution overseas. I mean, it's just such a well documented part of our history. I saw somebody comment, I don't know if he lives in the area, but it's Palmetto Tower Company. Christians don't hate Jews where I live. And he says, BS. Well, I'm going to just say something on that really quick, because I'm on Gab, and I actually like Gab as a platform, partly because it opened my eyes to the fact that there is all this anti-Semitism. That's the thing. When you stifle free speech, then you can't even know what exists. And I mean, oh my gosh, some of the stuff I see, I'm like, oh, I didn't even know people thought like this. I love Jews. In fact, one of my greatest experiences, I was in a Jewish deli in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'd never felt such familial warmth within a group of people. I mean, Jewish people have a community, and it was beautiful. I love Jews. I love everybody. I just love people, and it's just. I'm shocked sometimes at the statements I see. I just, did they really say that? I actually saw one the other day, and they put up a picture of Adolf Hitler. It's his birthday, I guess, whatever, within the last week. And they said, they had this picture of Adolf Hitler, and it said, today we celebrate the birth of the one man who was willing to take on the Jewish nation. I'm like, what the? But these people, I'm like, I can't believe that this stuff is like real. I'm like, it's shocking the heck out of me, but it's good to see it because now I know that it actually is real. And I think that's one of the things when we talk about freedom of speech, because I think people kind of expose themselves as crackpots when they're allowed to speak freely. That's why I'm such a Christians are Jews by adoption. I saw a great comment there, which is so true because that's when you go into, the Christian faith is the adoptive nature of God. We have that, he has adoptive love towards us because we weren't born Jews, but the Jewish race was actually to spread the gospel. And yeah, I mean, mankind's messed everything up. So I won't even get into the whole history on that because we are so good at messing absolutely everything up, which is why I love our Constitution and our system of government. I want to bring this back around to, we've watched over the last couple of years absolute draconian rules. I mean, just like over the top stuff. I mean, the mechanisms of control and how they've tried to do this, and then how they've worked to get people to enforce it. And I saw the sheriff of Los Angeles County just go like, "Oh, come on! I mean, no, we're not doing this anymore." I've seen other sheriffs go like, "Look, this isn't our job." And even my friend who's in law enforcement in Minneapolis, they called him in to enforce a passport at a restaurant. This person didn't have their passport, and he's like, "I'm not taking that call. Are you kidding me? We can't even go pursue, because in Minneapolis you can't even pursue carjackers, but you're supposed to worry about somebody without one of these jab passports at the restaurant." And that was the issue. And when there's actual real issues, what do you see, I guess, the role of the sheriff when you're having, because there really isn't like, so they talk about emergency powers. And actually, that's in US code, but there's literally no allowance for governments to have these unhinged powers during a quote unquote emergency. I can't find it in there. So, what are your thoughts on all of that?
I watched, living in the state of Washington, our governor was one of the more draconian, aspects of that whole COVID aspect. Him and his mandates. And we looked at it this way. We didn't enforce or write any tickets or anything like that over the mandates. We educated people and said, "Hey, look, here's a way to protect yourself." I had many pastors go, "Sheriff, we still want to do church. Just do church. Just do your best to protect your people. One thing I can't protect you against is a lawsuit. So if you do something and somebody gets sick and dies and they sue you, I can't protect you from that. But, do your best to take care of your congregation, have church." We had a lot of unique examples that some of the churches did drive-up services where people would drive into the parking lot, tune to a certain FM station, and they'd have church that way. And I told our health director this. And I said, "Look, you're not enforcing any of these laws on homeless people. And you're really not even quarantining them But you want me to go and tell businesses what to do? I'm not doing that. Since you don't want to take this, the Constitution says that whatever we do will be done fairly and equitably. Well, if it's not going to be done that way, I'm not going to be making criminals out of my business people because they're remaining open when you're letting criminals out of the jail.
Exactly.
That's just not happening. I'm not trading people like that. Business owners have.
I'm not trading business owners for convicts here.
Like I don't get this. So we didn't do any of that. We did a heavy education portion. We did our best, and then our governor passed a mandate that if you didn't get a vaccination and you were a state employee, you got fired. And we were like, no, we're not doing that. We are absolutely not doing that. My board of county commissioners said, we're absolutely not going to do that. However, when the president came out and said basically the same thing, and thank goodness the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. I told my board of county commissioners that if it comes to the point that you're going to enforce the federal mandate, the first person that leaves this agency will be me. Because I cannot do it. I cannot fire somebody for not wanting to put something in their body. That is one of the most sacred aspects of existence is determining what goes inside my body. Now, full disclosure, I'm vaccinated. I was in the military. I've been vaccinated with a whole bunch of stuff that I don't even know what I've been vaccinated with. So it really didn't bother me. I did my research. If you got vaccinated, fine. If you didn't, that's fine too. That was a choice. It was a personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no way I was going to force one of my employees to take a vaccine that they didn't believe in. And I will tell you this, that one act did more damage in getting people to get vaccinated than any other act the government they did on that. Because when you tell people you have to, and you're going to force them, at least Americans go, hey, you're not forcing me to do anything. This is a free country. I will not be forced to do that. And it hurt us. That and the fact that they lied to us. They lied to us continually throughout that whole COVID experience. And they made a political football out of it. Well, you can't expect people to trust and believe you when you're playing politics with that type of aspect. And I'll tell you this, I hope that the future leaders that are coming up, if you ever have another pandemic, you will. And I hope you learn from us. And I hope you never do what we've done, because taking somebody's job away from them is as close as you come to killing them as you can get. Because you're taking away, they feed their family, taking away the way that they put a roof over their houses. It's one of the most damaging things that can be done. And our government did that to several people. And it is an act that I will tell you that it will never be forgotten and it will never be forgiven. You can't, that is tyranny at its worst.
Yes. No, it's basically it's a form of mental terrorism. I mean, people find meaning in their jobs. They find a sense of purpose. It's such an important aspect of their life that to do that is the whole thing was so shameful. I look back on all the stuff that went on, and I saw people getting hauled out of restaurants or hauled out of this, and making actually common citizens, good citizens, turning them into criminals by, quite frankly, laws that were never passed, because these things were never done like, okay, we're going to make a law. How do you make a law? I watched Schoolhouse Rocks. I'm just a bill up on Capitol Hill, and it's just a bill. Okay. And then everybody had to approve of it, and it had to be signed in to be law. But then there's an even greater law. The law of the land is the Constitution. So if you're passing a law And that's Marbury versus Madison. If you're passing a law that flies in the face of the Constitution, it's out anyways. It doesn't, not every law that is passed is actually legal. And not every law that is passed is moral. I mean, it just doesn't. I don't know. I was just, it was tough. We live way out in the sticks, Sheriff Knisevich. We're on like 500 acres of ground out in the middle of nowhere. Our driveway's a mile long. We live off the grid, and in some ways it didn't affect us, but, it took a lot of the enjoyment out of life, that we enjoy as citizens to, just travel freely and not deal with nuttiness. I mean, just to enjoy life. It was lame. I don't know how else to say it, but I find your answers to be very encouraging. I did see a question from one of my moderators. She asked, "How do you, like, as a citizen, if you've got a sheriff who's kind of a wild card, has gone off the deep end, right? They're like what you would call an unconstitutional sheriff. They're not upholding their oath of law." She said, "Well, how do you hold that accountable? How do you deal with that?" And
Pretty simple. I mean, for a sheriff, we get the biggest job performance review every 4 years there is, and that's called an election. And if somebody's not doing their job, that's how you hold an elected accountable. So that's that. I mean, that's why I truly believe that there's a lot of places that are trying to get rid of elected sheriffs. King County, Washington, got rid of their elected sheriff. The politicians put that on the ballot. The citizens sadly passed that because the citizens of Spokane County, their law enforcement, they have a voice.
yeah,
You mentioned it. It's a unique position. The minute I became elected, I'm still a law enforcement officer, but I am truly the voice of the public. I represent the public. I don't represent anybody but the public. Internally, externally, it doesn't matter. I represent the public, and that's it. I do what's best for the public, and the day that I no longer meet with the public's expectations, they can remove me. But there's one thing I want to also talk about, is this notion of constitutional sheriffs. I don't know any sheriff that isn't a constitutional sheriff, because we all took an oath to the Constitution. We all believe in the Constitution. There's roughly 3,000 of us in the nation. But if you've read the Constitution of the United States, nowhere in the Constitution of the United States does it mention the office of sheriff. Nowhere. Not every state has sheriffs. Connecticut actually voted to do away with all their sheriffs. Alaska's never had sheriffs. The northeast part of the country, most sheriffs have lost their arrest authority and are nothing more than paper servers. South of the Mason-Dixon line, sheriffs are still law enforcement and hold great sway within their communities. West of Mississippi, the same thing. Sheriffs are very well liked and very important to the fabric of local government. But nowhere in the Constitution of the United States does mention the sheriff. And if we were all that in a bag of chips, every county in the United States would have a sheriff, an elected sheriff, a constitutionally based, and that constitutionally based is not that I believe in the Constitution. It's actually in the state constitution of Washington. My office is actually enumerated there. My authorities and everything are in the state constitution. And there's a lot of people who talk about constitutional sheriffs because one former sheriff has made a lot of money speaking around the nation, really talking about things that aren't true. And I see a lot of that, and I have to deal with that all the time of, well, Sheriff, are you a constitutional sheriff? Yeah. But if you mean, do I belong to some association that's titled the Constitutional Sheriff's Association? No, I do not. because it's a fraud. And the individual that started it is a fraud also. And I have no use for that individual, never will. And that's just the way life is. I mean, anybody that says that we need to send women up front to get killed during an armed conflict is a coward in my book. And that's what that individual did. So be careful about the narratives that people drive out there, because some of it sounds real sexy. Constitutional sheriff. What does that really mean? Other than somebody made up an association that very few true sheriffs belong to. And it's just a dialogue. It's one of those things that suck people into this darker side of the extremism. And Sheriff Mack is part of that darker side of the extremist. And again, folks, I don't have much use for it. And I haven't ever since I listened to him literally state that we should put women up front during a conflict down in Nevada so the world can watch the evil federal government kill them. The last person I saw hide behind a woman was Saddam Hussein. No American sheriff would ever make that comment.
You know, it's interesting. I've actually had Sheriff Mack on the show, and you know, I'd never heard that comment. I actually enjoyed him as an interview, and his thoughts on the FBI were kind of like right down the line with me, because they don't have a congressional charter. I do know that to be true, and federal law enforcement run amok at this point in my mind. We're not, you know, anytime you take a law enforcement body away from its proximity to the people, just like, you know, politicians as a whole, I think you start losing. Well, they lose touch with their constituency, and you know, it becomes this whole. You know, one of the things I've always said this. One of the things I think conservatives deal with is that I say I just want to live my life. I just want to be left alone. You know, but then, you know, you've got this other side, you know, that just lusts for power. I mean, like it is a lust. I mean, it is the driving force of their life. And so it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. And because I just want to be left alone, I just don't want much government involvement in my life, nor do I really want all that much involvement in it. But, you know, it seems like we're kind of at a disadvantage there, because the very act of not wanting too much involvement in it makes you not involved. And yet the other folks are wanting this complete modicum of control. And so they'll work hard to have that control. So
you mentioned it early on in the program. Government, in my book, does very little other than protect us and provide infrastructure so we can have roads, bridges, so we can do commerce and take care of life, go to work and do the things we have to do. That's really what government was designed to do. Now government has expanded into all these niches in our lives, and I think they truly forget what they were designed to do. They were designed to provide us a way to live our lives, to conduct business, to do our jobs. Because let's face it, you're no different than 99% of the people that I know. All you really want to do is go to work, raise your family, have a good life, and, you know, make sure that, you know, government provides those things that if somebody does come and threaten all that, they're dealt with.
yes.
And that's really what we should be about. But we've gotten so involved in everything, and it's really being used against us at this point because of the dogma on both the left and the right. It is about power. Let's make no mistake about it. It is not about you anymore. It is about their power. And when I say their, I'm talking their party's power. The party is everything to them. I get in trouble all the time because I'm not a respecter of the parties, and I will support people. If I find a good person, I'll support them. I don't care what left, right, whatever that is. Do you believe in certain things? Do you believe in the Constitution of the United States? Do you believe that, quite frankly, for me, the Second Amendment means that I have the right to own a gun? That is my right. And there's no such thing as an assault weapon. That is a myth. That is a politician made up a term and called my AR an assault weapon. There's no such thing. And then when you start talking about those type of things, if you cannot agree that our founding fathers put that clause in the Constitution, that amendment, for this reason, that was for us to have the right to protect ourselves against all threats, both foreign and domestic. It's not to be in a militia. It was so that we, if need be, could protect ourselves from all threats, foreign and domestic.
Yes.
And what did you see in 2020? You saw government stop protecting their people. They allowed our cities to be burned. They allowed 9 blocks of Seattle to be taken over by thugs. That whole movement was really a Marxist movement at that point. They were talking Marxist doctrines. And people need to start waking up to what the real threat is. The real threat is the dialogues that are going on. And the real threat is the fact that there are people trying to divide us, and you mentioned it earlier, along racial boundaries. Mm-hmm. They're using race to divide this nation. Just like you, I come from an area that we all got along, and we're all sitting there baffled right now going, how did it get this messed up? How did it get that way? Well, they weaponized this event in Ferguson.
Yeah.
An event that
all hands up, don't shoot, which was a false narrative.
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
Even the reporter that started that will tell you didn't happen. And you can read that, folks, in the Washington Post. Look it up. The reporter goes, I was wrong. He said Michael Brown should not be a poster child for any movement because he did take that police officer's gun away from him at one point, had it pointed at the police officer. The police officer was able to get the gun back, and Michael Brown attacked him a second time. That is the truth. But what has your media done? Your media joined in on a false narrative, and they have used that false narrative from August of 2014 forward to divide this nation. And we need to be a little bit more cautious about what we believe, who we're believing, and what we're watching. I have very little use for the media right now. It's abandoned their core responsibility, which is to inform us, not preach to us. They're supposed to give us the information so we can make our decisions, not their opinions. And, quite frankly, they wonder why, as the Gallup does a poll every year, they rank 13, 14 industries. Their industries, their side of that is down in the 20% believability, how the public look at them. The military, small business, and law enforcement are in the top 3.
In spite of all the attacks that they put on military, law enforcement, and business, all of them have been attacked by the media.
And they can't stand that fact. And I keep pointing it out to them. The reason no one believes you anymore is you're not giving us the truth anymore. Folks, it's just like this Russia. Russia interfered in the 2016 election. Well, they did, but not the way the Democrats, not the way the media said. It wasn't Trump-based, but they did. They interfered, and they interfered by inciting hatred between the races. And they continue to do that. Russia is trying to divide this nation by feeding us false information based on racial lines to make sure that we destroy this country. Time to wake up, folks. Time to wake up to what's really going on. You do have enemies, but it's not the enemies you think you have.
Yeah, no, in fact, at that, we're seeing that even now. We're seeing false narratives, and that's the thing that's so frustrating because, we're seeing false narratives on both ends coming out of both Ukraine and Russia, and then our government won't give us the truth, and so people are kind of they've lost trust in everything, and I'm just tired of seeing Joe Biden send a $50 billion paycheck to, Zelensky every week, taking our tax money. I think that's, I don't, I've said this so many times. I see a lot of people on the right thinking, oh, Putin's some sort of savior or something. He's nothing of the sort. I mean, Putin's former KGB. I think Putin has his own ambitions, and he does for Russia, and that's fine. It's not our country, but and they can have their little squabbles over there that really aren't all that little because it's involving human lives. But that's not something I want to be a part of. And I don't think the majority of America does. It's it's also frustrating right now between the media and then government and all the lies and how we're trying to sift through this on a daily basis, and sometimes not coming to the right conclusions, sometimes coming to the right conclusions, but always trying to stay grounded with what's real and what's true. And for me, that was it's the word of God and it's our Constitution, and that's what I just keep going back to. But you're right. I mean, there's so much misinformation and disinformation coming out, and that's one of the biggest challenges right now because then, and especially when it's controlled, which is why the left is so up in arms about Elon Musk and Twitter right now. It's just amazing to see. But if we
One
can,
thing that I would challenge you and your listeners to do though is this: don't get sucked down the vortexes of sexy phrases, catchphrases, and things like that. Constitutional sheriff being one of them. Do your research. I had to do that research, folks. I did. I have researched many of these so-called patriots. And once you get deep into them, you realize just how, no, they're not what they portray themselves to be. They're not. So do the research. It's really not that hard. You'll find that they don't like to pay their bills. They get houses foreclosed on them all the time. They were actually Democrats at one point, and they've run for office under every label you can find. They're not loyal to anything, but they suck you in, and it's money for them. Not so much power at times, it's money. The Redoubt sucks a lot of money in, and they have this network, and you have some of these speakers that some people go, oh yeah, he's a great guy. No, do your research.
I used to sell professional speakers. Okay, this was part of my background, and I'll tell you what. I mean, you get them behind and off stage. I remember one guy. Everybody thought he was the nicest guy in the world. He had a literal freak out before the speaking event. He said we were trying to ruin him just because we didn't have a handheld mic and all we had was a lapel at that place. They are personalities, so many of these people, and that's why I'm always telling everybody in my audience, and please hear this again, don't ever put your faith in any man. I'm telling you, it's just, we are all fallible, and oftentimes the people with the biggest followings are the ones that are the most fallible. It's real. I did have a question come across. I want to ask this because somebody asked in the super chat. They asked about, I think you had covered this a little bit early on because you weren't willing to enforce unconstitutional edicts, but they asked about going against the government if it has to protect the Constitution. And so, and you kind of mentioned that in terms of the enforcement of edicts, but and I don't know where beyond where that question goes, I guess. Here's my it exactly. Antoine asks, will this sheriff go against the government if asked to protect the Constitution?
Well, here's a question for Anton. Who gets to make that call? Who gets to make that call? If you're talking about taking up arms against your government, who makes that call? Me? Aren't you creating a tyrant at that point? Because again, going along the lines of the sheriff is the most powerful law enforcement executive, more powerful than the president of the United States. Okay, and sheriffs should pick and choose what laws that they enforce. I'm telling you, that is a slippery slope, because the people elect a legislature. The legislature passes laws. And if I don't like what that law says, I do what our founding fathers have put in place. I file an injunction or a lawsuit. I take it to the third branch of the government, the judiciary, and I try to stop it within the framework that our constitutional allows and what our founding fathers have allowed. They put this all together. Because the day that I start choosing what laws to enforce, it's not far for me to start choosing on whom those laws will be enforced. So you're going to put that all in my power? Because my county is 525,000 in population. One man's going to make the call for 500,000 people? Or do I listen to what our community has to say? When you start talking about picking up arms against your government, you better have really good reasons to do that.
Yeah, there actually is. I mean,
reasons.
Yeah, and I will state this much, and to your point, I'm just kind of watching the comments fly, and not everybody agrees on everything, and I'm fine with that. I've told my audience, you're not going to agree with me all the time. I won't agree with you all the time. All of this, but I do see that as the can be a slippery slope in terms of investing that much power in one individual and then trusting them, because I just said don't put too much faith in one man. Then and then wait, we're supposed to put all this faith in one person in a population of 500,000 people. So I totally get where you're coming from. I think where this goes, and which you had stated before, and so that I think this is the right approach. It's like, well, if I see a law that's going to ask me to arrest somebody that's clearly unconstitutional or enforce an edict that is clearly unconstitutional, I won't do that. But to ask me to take up arms against the government, would I say there's never a time to do that? No, I wouldn't. But is that an easy decision to make? Absolutely not. I mean, this is, and that's got to be, it's almost more of a like a communal decision at that point versus one man saying, "Oh yeah, all right, we're gonna go." You're right. You're just trading one form of tyranny at some point for another, vesting too much power into one individual again, where our Constitution has that all set up through the process of separation of powers and judicial, executive, legislative branches. So
the sad part is there are people out there that are looking for that tripwire. They're literally looking at the tripwire to take this country down. And a lot of people, those words are easy to say, pick up arms against your government, but have you really thought out the full process of that? What's next? Once you've done that, once you've broken the country, who puts it back together? And I'll tell you right now, yeah, we were born out of a revolution, but we do not have George Washington here with us anymore. We don't have those founding fathers with us anymore. Those people, George Washington had the opportunity to be King Washington. He said, no, we didn't do that. We did not just go through this revolution to trade one king for another. We put this in the hands of the people. You tell me you have, in all these so-called patriots movements and all these. You tell me, you show me a George Washington that once they get that power, that they're going to relinquish it.
Yeah, George Washington, I mean, to relinquish that power, even King George said, he did what? He said, then he's the greatest man alive.
Because we don't have that today.
And that's
people with egos, and they're hotheads, and I don't trust any of them to be that type of individual to go, yeah, we fought it. We've restored the Constitution, because I've also read the game plan. We had an individual that came in and dumped a ton of literature on our desk going, these folks are talking about tearing this country apart. And they actually did. They had a game plan and everything else. Well, part of that game plan, if you didn't play well in the sandbox with the new rule, you died. You got killed. So I've read the game plan that some of these people have for us, and it's chilling. That's why I speak out against the extremes on both the left and the right. Antifa is real, folks, despite the fact that the media and the Democrats don't want you to believe it. They are real. They do have a plan, and they do, they burned cities down. They combined with Black Lives Matter, and they did some destruction. The Black African-American community, they didn't want any of that to happen. But
correct.
These extremes came in and did that. And, I get heat all the time about these type of things. Last year, I stood in this room with the chief of police here locally and talked about the fact that we had 4 kids in the last year, just shy of a year, that had been killed on our streets due to gang violence. You know what we heard next? The next week, the socialists put in the newspaper in letters to the editor that the chief and I were racist, white supremacists, for standing up and talking about these kids dying because of gang violence. And I'm sitting there going, time out. I thought Black kids' lives matter. And you're not willing to step up and say, let's stop the death here. So I went, fine. If me stepping up trying to save young Black men from dying makes me a racist and a white supremacist, I'll be a racist and white supremacist for you all day long.
Yeah.
But I'm done with watching kids die in my community. So where's Black Lives Matter now? I have more than 4 kids dead in my community after 2 years. Where are they now?
This blows my mind that in Spokane, you've got drive-by shootings. That was kind of shocking when you brought that up at the beginning. I mean, Spokane just doesn't. I mean, that blows my mind.
We had a full-scale gun battle at rush hour traffic at a major intersection. 2 carloads unload on each other, and I can't. There's dead silence from Black Lives Matter. Dead silence from the NAACP. Dead silence from the City of Spokane Council. Dead silence.
Gosh, that's just nuts. We're just over an hour, so we'll kind of start bringing this to a close. But I want to just mention, I kind of watch comments as they fly through the chat, and I think that, and I've always had this belief that there's, I think as people talk, right? And they listen to people talk, they start forming opinions, and then the opinion becomes entrenched, and then it's like, wow, you're going down this, and it becomes like an argument. And I try to avoid that, and I have over the course of my life. I want to be able to see clearly. I want to be able to see clearly the sides of the argument, and I know that I may not come to all the same conclusions as somebody else does. That doesn't mean that I don't agree with them 90, 95, 98, even 99% of the time, but we may disagree on a specific issue. But, I think a lot of people are like, well, and I get where this is coming from. People are so frustrated because they went through all this draconian lockdown, all this stuff. And they're like, who's going to stand up to it? Okay. And so I think a lot of people pin their hopes on the sheriffs. So I just want to bring into this that was very clear. And one thing that I think that was so great is, sheriffs don't have to run around enforcing laws that they don't feel are legit. And that's what you did. So people say, well, how is he going to stand up to the government? Well, that's standing up to Governor Inslee in my mind. Okay, now I don't know what you guys are thinking out there, but to me, that's what I would want the sheriff to do. That's what seriously, I don't know what else. I don't expect him to like run down to the Capitol and haul the governor out. Okay, that's not. I mean, not that somebody's.
I've done that. I've literally done that. Our governor declared our state a sanctuary state in 2019. When he did that, I went very public and went, if the governor of this state does not want to obey his oath of office, does not want to enforce the laws of this land, because it's illegal to come into this country improperly. It's called illegal aliens, folks. They're not immigrants. They're illegal aliens. And so if my governor doesn't want to enforce the laws of the country, one of two things should happen. He should be censored or he should be arrested for obstruction of justice. It's that simple. When the state of Washington passed some new gun laws that said that people under 21 cannot purchase a semi-automatic rifle, I went to court, joined a court battle over that. I was an expert witness in that fight against that law. Our founding fathers gave us the proper ways to do things. It's time that we start getting the hotheads out of the room, and some of these sexy voices out of the room that make people believe that it's time to take arms up against your government, because that's a very, very that step you better think about really hard. Revolutions, there's only one in the history of the world that I know turned out right, and that was ours.
Yeah.
And that was because we had the right people leading that charge. I don't see that same leadership in any of these so-called movements on the left or the right. What I see is tyrants. No more, probably bigger tyrants than what we're already currently facing. So be careful, folks, about what you're talking about and what you're thinking about, and who's going to make that call. Because when you make that call, you're making that call for all of us, and you're destroying that one thing that we have, and that is our true freedom. Who's going to put all that back together once you've gone to war with each other?
That is, I mean, that really is.
And the damage and the destruction and the death toll that come along with that. And your outside enemies, you think there'll be outside enemies much longer? No, you'll have them on our foreign soil or on our current soil, our home soil, because you allowed it. Then they're waiting for that. And they're feeding you this, and they're trying to get you to do this. My talk on this, or my thought on this, is what you just said. You and I will never agree 100%, nor should we, because the day that we start agreeing 100%, we step into a different realm. It's called an occult, and you don't drink the Kool-Aid 100%. I can respectfully disagree with you, and I can back 90% of what you say. But here's the problem with the extremes. The minute you no longer believe 100%, you're dead to them.
Yeah, no,
Believe me, if you don't believe me, test it out. Go to, some of your folks that are on this, if you're part of one of these extreme fringes, left or right, go disagree with them once. See what happens to you. I've watched it happen. How do you think people end up coming out of those things? They disagreed, and next thing you knew, they were ostracized. It's not good, folks. I'm telling you. Be careful what you get into, and elect people with integrity. You want to fix this? Stop electing the dogma. Stop electing the extremes. Elect people that care about you, the people. I've been doing this for 16 years as an elected sheriff. I've not had a general election that my numbers were below 71%. Why? Because I care about people. I spend most of my time out in the public with the people. My wife and I, we have maybe 2 weekends off from the May through September because we attend every community event we can every year, not just election year, every year, listening and being with people. You want your country back? Start taking a look at who you're electing and why they want to serve you. And remember, there's no such thing as government. There's not this thing called the government. Not here in the United States. We, the people, are the government of the United States. You have forgotten that. We are the government.
Can I ask you a question? Because this is a legitimate concern, and I am not going to speak to a specific event, but independent Betty. Actually, she's a citizen of Washington State, but she mentioned that, and there's this feeling out there, if votes aren't accurately counted, that being our fail safe, right? That's like how we can change things, right? And so what do you do then if you're in a situation and it's so funny because I'm like sitting here, I'm trying to dance around words, Ozzy, because
don't dance around the words.
Copy too here, as I call it. I mean, they just, it's like, don't talk about that. But the fact of the matter is, I can go back to like the late 1800s, and James Garfield was elected, and then he wasn't, and then he was one of the only presidents to ever see that left. And by all accounts, if you look at the history on that, he was cheated out of his second term. So my answer to that, but I want to get yours, but I just wanted for my audience, this is why local involvement is so imperative in the primaries, but also as election judges and all that. And I want to give everybody a really heartwarming thing that I saw. This is going on right now in the state of Minnesota, which is down the Wilkester Road, okay? But Kim Crockett's running for Secretary of State, and she sent this out. In 2020, Minnesota Republicans had only 3,000 election judges registered. This year, we've already hit 11,400, and more are coming. If we're not involved in the process, that's my answer to that. So I don't know what yours is, but
we're lockstep there. You have to be involved. You absolutely have to be involved with the process. Here in the state of Washington, several years ago, we had a gubernatorial race. And the Republican candidate won 2 of the 3 counts of that. He lost the last one because there were some ballots found in King County. That is still chilling to many of us. It is. It's still chilling. I highly recommend that people are involved. If anybody can show me voter fraud, I mean true evidence, because I've seen people float in and out since the last election with this claim, that claim. There's no evidence, folks. I need evidence. Then we can do something about that. But do I think that we're 100% not, no chance for any kind of fraud? As long as there's a human involved, you have an opportunity for fraud. It's just like I always say, every organization is perfect until you put the first person in it. Mm-hmm. All right? So be involved. hold people accountable. And thank God that some of our elected officials in some states are taking proper actions to make sure the vote is fair. These voting laws that the Democrats all scream about, my question to the Democrats that scream about the laws and legislations that are being passed, what are you afraid of if you're fighting against practices to make sure that our elections are safe and secure? What's your issue with that? Ask that question of those people. Why are you so opposed to legislation that says we're going to show an ID to vote? What's your problem with that? To me, if I and I'm old, if I have to show an ID to walk in an establishment that serves alcohol, why should you be so opposed to having me show ID to vote? I think that everybody in this country that votes should have to prove who they are and that they are citizens of the state that they say they're citizens in.
So I see, a lot of, and I knew this would happen, people be like, well, no evidence, right? And, but they might, you're dealing specifically with a county. So, I mean, you're not going to deal with situations. Let's just hypothetically say Georgia or, truck driver.
Well, that's for Jordans to deal with.
What's that?
That's for Jordans to deal with.
Exactly.
And,
or,
they started passing laws trying to make sure that things didn't happen. It doesn't help that, you have a water main break during an election, a national presidential election. Let's get real, folks. That doesn't help the credibility issues here. And let's just tighten these things up. Let's make sure that the proper people are voting at the proper places.
Yeah. That all being said, I'm right up on the end of it, and I gotta get home for dinner with my crew. And I want to thank you. First off, I want to thank you for your service. I know law enforcement isn't easy. I have multiple family members. I've got a cousin. He's now passed away, but he actually had to use his gun in line of duty 2 times. And many people don't know this, but as soon as you do that, you're assigned desk job till an investigation is complete. You've got everybody's looking in your underwear. So there's
you go from hero to criminal.
Yeah,
because that is a criminal investigation. People don't understand that.
No, and it is, and I mean, law enforcement should be held to a high standard. I think you would agree with that. I do too, but not an easy job. And so for somebody who's willing to do the job, I know there's crooked cops. I know like people talk about, but they are, I believe, more the exception than the rule. But there's, again, just as we've talked about before, you put people into anything and you're gonna like start losing your perfection. And I know that we expect our cops to do a lot and our sheriffs and whatnot to do a lot, meaning that they have to have a warrior mindset because we want them to protect, and then we want them to be kittens. It's the most bizarre and unrealistic expectation we have of any profession here in the country. I believe, I just firmly believe that. I think in terms of like, when you send soldiers out to war and then you tell them, oh, play by these rules that make no sense. Or you say, well, like during the case of like Black Hawk Down, go back to Mogadishu, and we won't send in the AC-130s because we don't want this to be political. Already political, already committed troops. You do everything you can to support them. That is not how it works in the military, and it isn't how it's worked in law enforcement. And it's a very, very tough job. So I do want to thank you for your service, 100%. And I thank you also for communicating with your citizens, not running around in enforcing orders from on high, from some governor who's gone off the deep end. And, the whole, there's a whole lot of issues that we could go on about because I'm enjoying the interview. And, although we may not agree on everything, I find you to be reasonable and, you've formed your opinions and you've got reasons behind them. And I always appreciate that versus somebody who just has an opinion with really no reason. So thank you for joining me today and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, and thank you for stepping up and being part of the discussion. I think it's important that people like you, you stood this up, and you stood up to ask the hard questions. For me, it all comes down to red, white, and blue. It's this country. It's everything that we believe in. And sometimes I worry that we have forgotten who we are.
Yeah.
And we need to regain the value systems that brought us to where we are as a nation. One of the greatest nations on the face of the planet. And here we are on the verge of destroying that because we've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten our core values. And the only way we pull this thing back together is to remember those core values and to treat each other as we were told. Love one another. That's no greater commandment ever given, I believe, is what the word says.
Yeah.
Love one another. We need to get back to remembering that we are Americans. We're not Democrats. We're not Republicans. We're Americans that believe in each other, and it's time to bring this country together. And it's, quite frankly, time to start rebuilding our country so we're not reliant on any other country in the world for anything.
Amen to that. I mean, which is why I think, if you go back to Trump, that's why people liked him so much, because it was, bringing back American manufacturing. Even Apple repatriated their money here to the shores of the United States. And by reducing taxes, he actually increased tax revenue. There were so many good policy decisions that he made, which is why people liked him so much, even though he was a bit of a loose cannon at times in his speech and everything else. It was great to see somebody that actually believed in America and didn't believe that America's whole foundation was terrible, which we were continuing to told.
America is one of the greatest countries on the earth because, quite frankly, we believe in each other. And, some people get upset when I say the next phrase. God had his hand in creating this nation.
Yeah.
We need to remember that what he creates, we don't tear apart.
Amen. Amen. With that, thank you so much, Sheriff Knizovich. It was a great interview. And Godspeed, God bless, and keep fighting the good fight out there.
Will do, and thank you.